Good morning. This is Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. Today we are going to discuss a new devotional titled Modern Jeremiahs. So what is modern Jeremiahs? For one, Jeremiahs is plural for the name Jeremiah. So we can be modern Jeremiahs. And so today I'm just going to introduce who Jeremiah was, why we would be modern versions of him, and his significance in ministry. So this devotional is dedicated to the book of Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, and what we learn about Jeremiah throughout his the book that we have to read for him. So, Jeremiah is a prophet. He is considered a major prophet in the Old Testament. So let me talk to you a little bit about major and minor prophets. So major prophets were prophets that were considered to do like really big works or have really substantial contributions to the Old Testament, versus the minor prophets had a lesser contribution, right? So it's just like kind of a status thing, but not really. They prophesied to whole body over a longer period of time, or to a short period for a small period of time, like that kind of thing. So Jeremiah is a major prophet. Jeremiah is also young. He's one of the younger of the prophets, actually possibly the youngest prophet, but some of the prophets we don't have a full age on. So definitely a young prophet. He's a major prophet though, so he's going to do a major work. And Jeremiah wrote the book of Jeremiah. Okay. And so what you'll find is when you look in the Bible that the major and minor prophets are at the end of the Old Testament. So those major prophets, minor prophets. There were prophets at the time that Jeremiah was prophet. So you have to know that. Sometimes we think that, okay, if it's a major prophet and a minor prophet, they weren't there at the same time. But actually, Zephaniah and Habakkuk were both prophets at the same time as Jeremiah. They overlapped each other as far as the prophecy. So Jeremiah is interesting because Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet. He cried all the time, okay? And that's part of the character that we're going to kind of look at as we look at the week, is that he was always crying, like he was always laboring. And part of that has to do with the background of what's happening when the book of Jeremiah begins. So I'll talk to you about that in just one second. Other things you may want to know about the book of Jeremiah. It was written between 630 and 850 BC, so which is before Christ, predating Christ, and which is again why it's part of the Old Testament. Remember, it's not Christ has not been born, and this is before his birth. Let's see. What else would you like to know? The book of Jeremiah has to do with God's understanding towards his people, despite the position of his people. And so that's the overarching theme there, is that this is how God turns toward his people, despite whatever situation they're in or whatever they're up to. So let me tell you a little bit of background about the book of Jeremiah that has to do with the character of it. So what's happening? Okay, so Jeremiah steps on the scene. He's clearly anointed by God to minister, but when he's called, he's really young, and so he's like, wait a minute, no, I can't be called to do this work. This is part of his issue with God in the beginning. The first time that we hear him like crying is when he's like, look, I can't do it. I cannot do this work. I'm too young. I'm sure it's not my time. I'm sure you made a mistake. I'm just a boy, right? And you're asking me to do this huge work. And the reason why he was saying it was huge work and why he was so reluctant to go forth to do it was because of the condition of the people. So Jeremiah was a prophet when the people were just basically doing whatever they wanted to do, okay? And I mean whatever. They were wayward. They were running away from the traditions that God had set in the standard, the culture for the children of Israel. They were just doing whatever they wanted to do. The priests were not right. They could be bought and sold, for a price, so they could be bribed. People could be bribed to prophesy certain things or not prophesy certain things. The military leaders at this time, and so we're talking about the Babylonian captivity is a part of this time. And so what's happening is people could be basically bribed or tricked to do whatever they wanted to. And the power, there was no real genuine, sincere, good good power, from the priests to the people to the government systems. Everything was corrupt. And that's why Jeremiah was like, I think I'm too young for this, right? You're asking me to do something with people who are absolutely not interested, right? So he's like, this is not going to be good. I'm too young to do it. But part of it is I'm too young, but they're too resistant. And so Jeremiah becomes the weeping prophet, because not only is he weeping because this is a really, literally, without the power of God, an impossible task to talk to these people about Jesus. I mean, about God. Jesus hasn't manifest yet. So about God and his presence and his truth and his laws and his governing and what should happen. And so that's one reason why he's weeping. He's like, this is going to be super difficult. The second reason why he's weeping is because he knows, like, these people are not really about to receive me. I'm going to suffer. And he's right. He does suffer. So he's right to believe that he will suffer, because it does come. So that's the second reason why he's weeping. But third is because the people are so turned away. I mean, it's sad for him to see his people turn away from the God that he loves. And so that becomes a very sad and somber kind of experience for Jeremiah. So he's weeping because of that as well. And then lastly, he's weeping because even at the end of all of this process, he's going to pour out his heart. He's going to pour it out, and he's not going to feel the gratitude, the feeling of, we're so glad you came, Jeremiah, to give us a word. And so it's a lot going on when we start the book of Jeremiah. But this is what I want to ask you. When I say, are you a modern Jeremiah? Are we modern Jeremiahs? Are we doing the same thing that he's called to do, that Jeremiah is called to do? Are we called to speak to people who may or may not be concerned about what we're interested in, or what we feel God has called us to be interested in? Sometimes the answer is yes. And if that's you, then this devotional is specifically for you. I mean, it's for all of us, because we'll always have to do something hard, right? We'll always have to approach people with the truth that may or may not be easily received. But in particular, there's some of us who are called to say words that we're like, oh, okay, I get to be the one to say this. Am I excited about it? Not really, but I get to be the one that says it. At the end, Jeremiah does his perspective turns around, but he weeps for a long time because of the distress of all of the components that I already talked about. At the same time, though, we can be the same way. And I found myself just recently having a little bit of a struggle that was like Jeremiah's. I was kind of weeping. I was kind of sad, and I thought, actually, I was talking to my sister, who is my best friend and a dear confidant sister in Christ, and she was encouraging me. She's like, look, you care more about the people than you thought you cared, right? I was crying about something, or I wasn't crying, but I was lamenting about something, and she says, no, you just need to realize that you care more about what they think than you thought that you did. And I thought, oh, I have to really deal with that, because I didn't think that I was so concerned for the people that if I gave a word that God told me to give, I wasn't going to just be able to move on. And so I got to a place of a little standstill, and I became like Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. Well, it's funny because that happened, and that God drew my attention to Jeremiah for this devotional, because it's kind of how I started ministry years and years and years ago. I was 13 years old, and I had an experience with God, and God was telling me to say something to someone. To a group of people, and I just wept, and I wept and wept, and I literally, this time it wasn't like a figurative lamenting. It was literally pouring down weeping tears, because I didn't want to share this information. I just didn't want to. I'm like, they don't want to receive this. Who am I going to do it? Everything that Jeremiah says in Jeremiah 1, which is one of the reasons why he's one of my favorite prophets, because he does a super hard job. People aren't like knocking on his door like, oh, Jeremiah, you're like Elijah, you're like Elisha. No, that doesn't happen for him. He doesn't get all these accolades. He suffers in some real ways. And so I was just crying. I remember these many years ago when I was 13, I just cried. I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And they don't want to receive me. They don't know who am I. And maybe you should find one of these teachers or one of these, ministers to say whatever it is you want said, but it's not me. And I guess I found myself full circle feeling the same way, like, oh, maybe not so much that I won't say it, but maybe they needed someone else to come and give them another kind of word, or maybe we should have sent someone else instead of me, because maybe my word is too harsh and you want to send somebody, or you send me to the people who want to hear this. And so it becomes this big convoluted concept of you're a weeping prophet, Erica. You are like Jeremiah. You're this person who, when you know you're supposed to be preaching the gospel, which is prophecy, right? To tell the truths of God. When you know you're supposed to be telling these people this word, now you're lamenting and you're crying and you're falling apart, and you need to go ahead and repent, turn from that position, and go back to doing what God told you to do with a straight face. Deal with it. Hang in there. You'll be okay. So maybe you're like me. Maybe you're like Jeremiah, and you've been sent to do work that's extremely hard, and the people are not necessarily ready to receive it. And if that's the case, it's all good. But I want to encourage you with this book of Jeremiah, this devotional on Jeremiah. We're going to look through and see the key points of what's important as we go to do work that may be difficult, because the people are difficult, or because the time is difficult, or because what we think about ourselves is difficult. But Jeremiah overcomes these difficulties, and he is a major contributor to the movement of God in this time. And so we want to be a part of what he's doing by at least identifying the key things that are essential, that he struggled with and that he overcame. And so I want to encourage you to continue to watch our devotionals as we look at the book of Jeremiah and focus on what it is for us to be modern Jeremiahs. Until tomorrow, have a blessed day. We're praying for you. Please be praying for us. Until then, goodbye.